Welcome back, class. We start off this new unit, unit number 3, with chapter 6, focusing on sensation and perception. The chapter overview. We'll examine the basic concepts of sensation and perception. We'll then spend some time examining vision, the sensory and perceptual processing, and then the non-visual senses. So what are we talking about here? Sensation and perception are actually parts of one continuous process. It allows us to be able to interact with the world, to be able to survive. It aids in our survival. Well, sensation, the process by which our sensory receptors and nervous system receive and represent stimulus energies from our environment. Perception is the process of organizing and interpreting that sensory information, enabling us to recognize meaningful objects and events. So as I stated, we sense the environment around us, we perceive what it means to us as the organism, and then we can respond to it in the appropriate way. There are two ways in which we want to look at this: bottom-up processing and top-down processing. Bottom-up processing is sensory analysis that begins at the entry level with information flowing from the sensory receptors to the brain. Top-down processing, information processing guided by high-level mental processes. That's when we construct our perceptions by filtering information through our experience and expectations. So the key item here is that with top-down processing, what we expect to see plays a role, and what our past experience plays a role too, and what we're going to perceive. So let's look at it more closely. So again, with bottom-up processing, sensory analysis begins at the entry level with information flowing from the sensory receptors to the brain. So look at the item I just put on the screen. What is it? So basically, your eyes detect the features, your brain pieces it together, and you perceive a picture of whatever you're going to call it. What you see is based only on sensory information coming in. So we're building it up, the process, and that's what we're going to use. The sensory input is what we're going to use to make a determination as to what it is. And top-down processing, information is guided by high-level mental processes as we construct our perceptions by filtering the information through our past experiences and what we expect. So let's look at this example. Now look at it. So we have two columns here. One represents A, then the image we showed earlier, and then C. Well, obviously, that image that we saw earlier now is a B. So it's A, B, and C. But we also have the ones over to the next column. We have 12, that image that we saw earlier, and then 14. So now that image now becomes 13. So, surrounded by sequential letters, your brain expects the shape to be letter B. Surrounded by numbers, the same shape now looks like number 13. The context drives your perception. Another example. Look at the image on the left. So it is a bottle with a stopper in it, and there's an image on the bottle. What is it? Well, some of you may see two figures, sort of like in an embrace. Others may have seen the dolphins, which I've illustrated here on the right image. They're both there, but depending on your expectation, depending on your experiences, it may be easier for you to see one image as opposed to the other. Do you see figures in an embrace, or did you see dolphins? So, all our senses receive sensory stimulation, often using specialized receptor cells. They then transform that stimulation into neural impulses, and they deliver the neural information to our brain. So, sensory receptor cells, they're specialized receptor cells in our body that are designed to detect certain types of stimulation or stimulus in the environment. We'll talk about light waves and we'll talk about sound waves later. But these are different types of stimulus energies, and we have specialized receptor cells in our body to be able to detect that. Now, the key thing here is that we cannot make sense of light waves. We cannot make sense of the sound waves. We have to have them transduced or turned into a form of energy and information that we can utilize in our body. So that leads us to transduction, the conversion of one form of energy into another. In sensation, the transforming of stimulus energies such as sights, sounds, and smells into neural impulses our brain can interpret. So one of the purposes and one of the functions of our specialized sensory receptor cells is to take these stimulus energies out in the environment and transduce them into a form of stimulus, a form of information that we can utilize in our brain. So let's talk about another concept that we need to get familiar with as we talk about sensation and perception. It's dealing with the absolute threshold, the minimum stimulus energy needed to detect a particular stimulus 50% of the time. So that means if we're looking at something, looking for something 10 times, 5 times we were able to detect it was there, 5 times we weren't able to detect it's there. That becomes our absolute threshold. Tested by defining the point where half the time a stimulus is detected and half the time it is not. Gustav Fechner, a German scientist and philosopher, studied our awareness of these faint stimuli. Now we have the idea of the signal detection theory. It predicts how and when we will detect a faint stimulus, a signal, amid background stimulation noise. So the signal is this stimulus that we are interested in, and the background stimulation is going to be noise. The individual thresholds vary depending on the strength of the signal and our experience, expectations, motivation, and alertness. So, imagine if you would, you're waiting for a package, but the package is supposed to arrive the same day that you're giving a party. The party and where you have your party at your home is sort of like in the back somewhere, away from the front door. So if you're not there to get the door when the doorbell rings, they may have to leave a post-it sticker on the door saying, "Sorry, we missed you." So the idea here is that we're going to be looking for that signal. But then we have the party sounds, which will act as background noise. So the idea is listed in this chart here. So the truth, so if there is a signal and you heard the signal, you respond as if you heard the signal, that represents a hit. If there was no signal, no doorbell, but you responded as if there was a signal and you went to the door, that would be a false alarm. But let's say there is a signal, but you act as if there's not a signal, you didn't go to the door, that's a miss. If there is no signal and you responded as if there's no signal, then we have a rejection or a correct rejection. So this just tells us that signal detection theory explains the scenarios where we act as if something's there or not there and whether or not it actually is or not. Now, it states here that our threshold of an individual's threshold will vary depending on experience, expectations, motivation, and alertness. So what if you did not get a good night's sleep? You may not be able to hear the bell. Okay, what if it was something very, very important to you? Then you'll make sure that you're going to be in a location where you may hear that doorbell and get to it. So you may be more motivated. What if you have a roommate that you don't like that much, and this is a package for that person who happens not to be in town while you're giving a party? You may not care that much about it, and so you may not be able to hear that signal and act as if the appropriate way that there is a signal and go to the door to get the package. So all this is saying is when it looks at these faint stimuli, okay, and the noise that is around, there are other individual factors of the person who's going to be listening for this signal that will come into play whether or not they actually hear it or not. Their motivation, their level of alertness, their experience, as well as expectations. So, the absolute threshold, again, is this minimum stimulation needed to detect a particular stimulus 50% of the time. So, we can see far away light in the dark and feel the slightest touch. So, have you ever at one point felt like a mosquito had landed on your arm? Sometimes you feel it, sometimes you don't. Okay, so the idea is that sometimes you realize it must have happened because you see that you've gotten stung by one. All right, so let's talk about this other concept, something subliminal. Subliminal. This is input that is below the absolute threshold for conscious awareness. Now, we talked about this in the previous chapter. The idea that we have conscious awareness and then we have unconscious, which we are not aware of. It's beneath our level of awareness. This is what this is addressing here. Subliminal is input from our environment that is below the absolute threshold for our conscious awareness. Now, another idea somewhat associated with this is something called priming. Priming is activating, often unconsciously, associations in our mind, thereby setting us up to perceive, remember, or respond to objects or events in certain ways. There's a movie clip I want to show you a little bit later. I'll make sure it's posted on your Canvas site that demonstrates this. It's a Will Smith movie. I can't get the name of it right now. All right, so the idea is that we see that there are things that we can do via priming that are operating oftentimes unconsciously that helps us make associations in our mind. So these topics are dealing with things that are below our level of conscious awareness. So the idea, we have the subliminal stimuli on the graph here, and you can see it indicated in the light shaded blue there. So the idea is that these items of subliminal stimuli are below the absolute threshold, so we don't have conscious awareness of them. So an absolute threshold is the intensity at which a person can detect the stimulus half the time again. Hearing tests locate these thresholds for various frequencies. So why do we study these types of things? Well, we want to make sure that the tones, bells, and whistles that we employ for operating machinery are well within the range of our objects or our organisms being able to detect that there is a sound there, that there is a light there. So we study all our levels of absolute threshold and our ability to perceive things so that we can utilize this as we design equipment for human-machine interaction. Okay, so now let's look at this. We have a variety of types of thresholds here. We have something called the difference threshold. So we've talked about absolute already. The difference threshold is the minimum difference that a person can detect between any two stimuli half the time. So it increases with stimulus size. A 5 decibel increase in volume will be noticed at a starting point of about 40 decibels, but not at 110 decibels. We experience as is the just noticeable difference. So we're wanting to be able to detect the difference, for example, between two light bulbs. All right, so we have two light bulbs in front of us. Both of them are lit up, and we're changing the light intensity of one of the light bulbs. And we want to be able to have the person who's watching this to be able to say they're different. Okay, so how often and on what regular basis can they detect the difference between these two stimuli? That is the difference threshold. Weber's law: for an average person to perceive a difference between two stimuli, they must differ by a constant minimum percentage. The exact portion varies depending on the stimulus. For example, the minimum percentage to be able to detect the difference between two stimuli are going to be 2% for weight, 8% of light intensity, 0.3% for a sound wave. So the idea is that we know now how much of something by way of percentage, much more or less of something needs to be there for you to be able to detect a difference between the two stimuli. Again, this is the difference threshold. Detected this difference at least half the time again. Now let's talk about a topic that most students have some degree of interest in, and that's going to be subliminal again, subliminal persuasion specifically. So subliminal stimuli, as we sort of introduced the idea a few slides ago, subliminal stimuli are those that are too weak to detect 50% of the time. They are below the absolute threshold. Subliminal sensation exists, but such sensations are too fleeting to enable exploitation with subliminal messages. Now, let me give you a little bit of background here. This was something that a few decades back people were always concerned about: subliminal persuasion or hidden messages. So the idea was this: that you could show something to someone that would be so faint that they would never have any conscious awareness that they are detecting it. But again, as we've talked about in the previous chapter, you may not be consciously aware of something, but you may fully well be unconsciously detecting that particular stimuli. And the belief was, if you were shown a message that was at the subliminal level, that it could influence your behavior, your feelings toward whatever the communication was about. That's the basic idea. So that leads us to this concept of subliminal persuasion. All right, so with subliminal sensation and persuasion, what they're saying here is that yes, we do have the ability to sense things subliminally, but the impact on us is too fleeting for us to be exploited by it. So subliminal persuasion may produce a fleeting and subtle, but not a powerful or long-lasting or enduring effect on behavior. So that's the research. Experiments disprove claims of the effectiveness of subliminal advertising and self-improvement tapes that people may listen to that are on designed on the premise of giving you subliminal messages beneath your level of awareness. So let's look at some examples from the past of subliminal advertising, subliminal messages, subliminal communication. So this is a classic one. Break out the frosty bottle. This is the alcohol ad in a magazine. All right, and so I'll show you a little bit later where the subliminal message is and why they use certain types of ideas in advertising. This is a little bit of subliminal as well. Fill the curves. This is subliminal graffiti where people hide things in images within advertisements to try to get a rise out of people, so to speak. This is a classic one with the Little Mermaid where they had a phallic symbol painted on the cover of the VHS tape. You guys probably aren't familiar with them that much, but the VHS tapes were these tapes where you would record video images, and they had them out for Disney, the Little Mermaid movie, and they had to recall a bunch of them because someone had put something in there purposely to sort of do a little bit of subliminal graffiti. Here is context of subliminal messages. So we see in this old Burger King ad, it just tastes better. You see this big rib sandwich, I guess it is. It'll blow your mind away. The idea here is the context. The arrangements of the images may make you think of certain types of things. So the notion is you could glance over this, not really pay that much attention to it, but at some level, the idea is that it's subliminally communicating to you. I'll just show you a few more. And this is the one we started off with. So in the ice cubes of this particular print ad, you have images that seemingly sort of spell out sex, sex. Now, why sex? You've seen plenty of commercials and advertisements, and oftentimes you see people who are highly attractive. We don't see it as much in old car ads and magazines. You usually have some very attractive female model next to a sports car. The only reason they have that sort of scenario is they want people to associate that car to the female. And the notion is through this association, you start to like things a little bit better. So oftentimes you will see sex or romance or something of that nature portrayed in advertising simply because people tend to like the feeling that that type of thing has, being romantically involved with somebody, caring about somebody, and they want those feelings to sort of associate with their particular product or service. All right, so let's get back to the idea of sensory adaptation and sensory input. So sensory adaptation is diminished sensitivity as a consequence of constant stimulation. So the idea is this: if you smell something, let's go, you go into a room and there's a bad odor in the room, is that after a while of you being in that room, you'll no longer smell that bad odor. You have adapted to it. Okay, so sensory adaptation is diminished sensitivity as a consequence of constant stimulation. So the odor's there, you're in the room, you're constantly being stimulated by, and therefore you become less sensitive to it. Why does this happen? Well, it aids us by reducing background chatter. So the smell is there, it's no longer new information, so we sort of start thinking about that as background information until we can perceive something new. So it influences how the world is perceived in a very personally useful way. You want to detect changes, and again, that's what we're designed to do primarily, is to detect when something changed. Our sensory receptors are sensitive to novelty, new stuff, not stuff that we already are aware of, stuff that we've already registered. We are going to be primed to detect when something in that environment changes. So sensory adaptation even influences how we perceive emotions. We perceive the world not exactly as it is, but as it is useful for us to perceive it. So in summary, when it comes to sensory adaptation, we're saying that the environment is full of information. We go to the environment and we detect something that's important to us at that moment. But if that is still there and we no longer get more valuable information, we put it on the background, the back burner. Okay, we reduce the sensitivity to it, and now it becomes more like background chatter. So it's not important to that individual at that time. So again, we perceive the world not exactly as it is, but as it is useful for us to perceive it for that individual. So what we see here is that if we look at these images of this female here, we gaze at the angry face on the left for 20 to 30 seconds. Then we look at the center face, it will look scared. Then gaze at the scared face on the right for 20 to 30 seconds before returning to the center face. Now it looks angry. So again, we're looking more for the novelty, a change in the environment. Okay, and this will impact how we even detect emotions. Now let's look at the idea of perceptual set. Perceptual set. Mental tendencies and assumptions that affect top-down what we hear, taste, feel, and see. What determines our perceptual set? Schemas, which we've talked about previously, organize and interpret unfamiliar information through experience. Pre-existing schemas influence our top-down processing of ambiguous sensation, interpretation, including gender stereotypes. So we have schemas that we talked about initially in the chapter Development Across the Lifespan with Jean Piaget. These schemas help for us to organize the world. And if we have pre-existing schemas, when we get ambiguous sensations in, we'll use those schemas, correctly or not, stereotypically or not, we'll use those schemas to help us interpret what's going on around us. Now, let's look at an example here of context effects. A given stimulus may trigger different perceptions because of the immediate context. So, what is above the woman's head? In one classic study, nearly all the East Africans who were questioned said the woman was balancing a metal box or can on her head and that the family was sitting under a tree. That's going to be based on cultural expectations and the context that they see there. But if we ask people of a more Western culture, what would they say? They would say most likely it's a window and maybe they're in an office waiting for an appointment or something. So again, we see the context has a great deal of impact on what we perceive, as well as our cultural background may have an influence on it as well. And finally, motivation and emotion. Perceptions are also influenced by our motivation and emotions. A couple of points here. Walking destinations look further away when we are already fatigued. Slopes look steeper when we are wearing a heavy backpack or after listening to sad, heavy classical music. Water bottles look closer when we are thirsty. So emotions and motives influence our perceptions.